Hello and welcome to Taking Liberties Radio Season 6, Episode 5. My name is Lee. I'm in Western Australia. This week I'm joined, of course, by Vikas in Canberra.
Hey, hey.
And after a bit of an absence, we've got Zeev in Melbourne.
G'day, hello.
Coming from a cave in Afghanistan, because that's kind of where it sounds like you are.
Oh dear. So, we will begin the jihad anyway.
To be fair, he is in Victoria,
Yes.
and
Which could actually be a more illiberal place than a cave in Afghanistan.
But to be fair, the entire thing we're talking about today is how backwards some of their criminal justice system is, and it's pretty apt that his voice comp sounds like he's from the last century, like their criminal justice system.
Oh dear. Is it any better now?
It is better now.
Is it any better? Oh, cool.
Better.
Excellent.
Well,
okay. I've rejoined the modern world.
You can tell us, Zeev, is the Victoria's criminal justice system worse than the Taliban?
Oh dear.
No, that's the question.
No,
What we're going to talk about today is George Pell and the whole lawyer. Actually, well, we know her name. It's Gobbo. It's her first name.
Nicola Gobbo.
Nicola Gobbo.
I was hoping I'm hoping we were going to keep our Gobbos shut about this one.
Oh. Thank you.
Okay. So we're going to talk about George Pell and his trial and the brouhaha, particularly in conservative circles over his conviction, and then we'll sort of segue into Nicola Gobbo and the whole lawyer X thing.
Informant 3838.
Yes. So let's begin with George Pell. If somehow you watch even less news than I do and don't know that George Pell, who is a cardinal in the Roman Catholic Church, has been convicted of child sex offences, you're probably listening to the wrong show. So you probably know the background. Gentlemen, what do you think?
Well, I'm going to go by some of the lawyers that I've seen, some of the lawyers' articles that I've read, and I'm going to go with the conviction appears unsafe, and he probably has reasonable chances for an appeal.
So, on what basis do those articles sort of assert that it's unsafe?
So it depends. So most of them have basically gone with the unreasonableness of the unreasonableness of a jury. I think Zeev can explain more to that effect. But basically, apparently, the first jury was 10-2 in favor of an acquittal, and the second jury is unanimously went for a conviction. Apparently, there may have been some questions as to how the jury pool was selected from. Some people have alleged that there may have been possible contamination of the jury, etc., etc., etc. So there is a little bit of that talk going on. There's also people saying, look, if it's such a high-profile case, there's no way they could have ever determined that the jury was even that there was even a chance of having an uncontaminated jury.
Sure. Yeah.
In other states, they would have gone straight to a
bench
trial. Correct me on this. Yeah, a bench trial. Yeah. So,
a judge-only trial.
Yeah, sorry, judge-only trial.
Yeah. Yes.
So there's a lot of people. So there's a lot of people leaning towards that. From most of the lawyers that I've seen who are criminal lawyers who are posting their comments about this or posting blogs or something, they all seem to be fairly leaning towards a appeal will probably be successful. I don't exactly understand the full legal reasoning why, but it seems to be the popular prevailing opinion.
Yeah. Well, to add to that, Vic, the basic test for the appeal will be whether no reasonable jury could have convicted Pell. If the Court of Appeal says that no reasonable jury could have convicted him, then Pell's conviction will be overturned. There are a couple of other appeal points, but I don't think they're really worth going into because they're regarded as much weaker and they'll just confuse people in their technicalities, and it's a distraction. The point is, it's basically an opportunity for the Court of Appeal rather to review the whole of the evidence and particularly the weaknesses in it, and assess for itself whether the case is just And if it does make that finding, then in a sense, it's a very damning criticism of the Director of Public Prosecutions for ever bringing the case, because for a court to say that the case is too weak to ever be reasonably found by a jury to have justified a conviction, you've got to wonder what the DPP is doing, bringing the matter to trial in the first place. But that's just a statement of the legal principles. In any case where that happens, you've got to wonder, wow, the DPP have really screwed this up.
Yep.
Now, in this specific case, there's been a lot of people who have accused Pell before, and I suspect, and this is something that Vikas was mentioning before the show, that Cardinal Pell has been accused many times of this kind of conduct, but he's never been charged simply because the allegations have been, for various reasons, found to be incredible and unbelievable. And some of them were dismissed at the committal hearing for this reason, I should add. There was a pre-trial assessment of the evidence by a magistrate who dismissed some of the charges because the people making the allegations just weren't credible. Now,
and that's what actually happened to the second case. So the suppression order on this one was because there was another case where he was accused of abusing two kids at a pool or something like that, and that was summarily dismissed at committee. So the committal hearing stage.
Well, that may be can still intended to bring the case to trial, and you see committals don't actually prevent prosecutions from reinitiating the case directly. It's an optional process, and the magistrate's dismissal of the charges, if he did do that, and I can't recall that he did dismiss the swimming pool charges, would not prevent it anyway from happening.
So you just explained something to me, because one of the articles I did read, now I'm going to have to dig this up, apparently this case was originally brought forward when both alleged people were alive. This one was brought up something like in 2009 or something like that originally. And now one of them is dead from 2014. But the person's mother testified that in 2009, he had said that it didn't happen. And he was, in 2009 stage, saying that it didn't happen. So that might be that was one of the opinions that I read, and I just realized that's probably one thing that Pell's lawyer is probably going to be arguing as well.
Absolutely. That's a critical fact. To my mind, that is the critical fact that Pell's lawyer will rely upon. You know, the trial was about that Pell abused two boys. Only one of them is alive and giving evidence against Pell. The other is dead and denied the allegations when he was alive. And that, to me, is something that it can't mind about whether it happened. And on top of that, of course, the alleged offending was said to have happened in a public place at a public time, with two boys at the same time, without any grooming, without any previous, but talking to them or anything like that. And I need to highlight this. It's very strange for an adult would think to control the behaviour of two boys and to sexually abuse them without any prompting or prior grooming at all in a public place at a public time, basically from a choir class that they were in, and just doing it without right off the bat with no, to me that I'm a little skeptical that it happened that way. I am. I'm not saying that it didn't happen, but I think there's enough there to certainly put some doubts in my mind about whether it happened quite the way it was alleged.
Yeah.
But that being said, I mean, it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. it's still possible that the victim or the complainant, however you want to call him, is telling the truth. It's just, to my mind, not beyond reasonable doubt on the limited facts we have in the media.
Yep. I guess the kind of the conservative, or the people who are Andrew Bolton, Miranda Devine, and basically the entire wing of the conservative movement who are very skeptical of his conviction, also point to the nature of just the literally the clothing that he was wearing. It was impossible to have done what he was alleged of him.
Oh, come on. No, look, those are silly arguments.
I don't know. I mean,
the clothing is a bit much. I think priests have managed to get out before. And there's even an article which I pointed to Vikas just before you got on, Lee, by Richard Cook in The Guardian. I must have missed the one by David Marr. This is one by Richard Cook. And he's saying, and again, we have to take his word for it about this clothing issue, but Cook says, and I'll take you to it, the defense is that cloth slits that are at the same time not openings, as in for the offending to happen, the slits through which nothing could emerge, but they are slits apparently in the clothes. Schoolboys incapable of dodging authority, rope that cannot be untied, and abuse is either reported in an instant or never existed. So look, some of the points are not necessarily, the strongest defences, and he points out there are also files in which priests raped children in the sacristy and in the altar, and not only in public, but in front of their own family in the same moving car while wearing vestments. And that same untieable cincture has been used to bind the hands of a 16-year-old boy, and on school excursions. Yes. So look, Cook has given quite a detailed outline of past allegations, not against Pell, but against other priests found proven, and at least that suggests that some of the defences raised by Pell's defence barrister may not have been quite as strong as
people think they
the
are.
Bolts. Correct.
Yeah, so
perhaps,
yeah. So that's why I think the unreasonableness of the jury is probably the best shot they've got, which is why they're leading with it. And I think that's why a lot of lawyers are basically doing it, if true, big, right, sort of thing with that particular allegation, and they're not really touching the other ones. But the one that really does cheese me off. So I started law and then I dropped it. But one of the law subjects I did was criminal 1, the first year criminal subject. And I remember about slide 3 on your first class is types of evidence, right?
Yep.
Testimony is a type of evidence.
Absolutely.
So every time someone says that he was convicted without convicted without evidence, my eyes start twitching.
Yeah, well, there was definitely evidence.
There was
the complainant
evidence.
Spoke and said that was what happened. That's spoken evidence, definitely admissible.
Definitely admissible. And I was sitting there and I can't tell you how many times I've had this exact debate on ALF and like countless other places. And it really pisses me off because some people say, I did law and that's not evidence. And I sit there going like, you should get your money back. Because I'm like, I paid attention to that first year criminal law class, and I remember that being there in one of the first slides.
Correct. Yeah. People sometimes think that evidence is like written records or documentary evidence, but actually, evidence is just can say I saw, heard, or said, or heard someone else say whatever they said. That's evidence.
Yeah. Sure, but it can like it's really about the strength and weakness of the evidence, right? And I will agree with everyone who says he was convicted on weak evidence. Absolutely fucking true. He was convicted on pretty weak evidence, and the jury believed it. And that's all that's required for a jury trial.
Correct. And often what you'll find in historical sex abuse cases is that convictions will happen on the basis of the spoken evidence of one complainant, or two maybe. Much more likely a conviction will happen where there's two complainants or three or more. When it's just the one, it's actually quite difficult to secure. It does, in a sense, because the nature of it is that all of these allegations, regardless of the matter, it doesn't have to be a priest, it can be any kind of matter, any kind of accused. And all of the allegations have one thing in common. They all happened 10, 20, 30 years ago. No one remembers anything. All the details of where and when something happened, no one remembers a thing. No one remembers it right. And that for the defence, that is a field day of inconsistencies and the like that strongly point to a case beyond reasonable doubt, especially when you only have the one complainant.
Exactly. So the thing is, like, and they say, like, oh, it was uncorroborated as well. I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't need to be. It just needs to withstand.
Correct. It doesn't have to be. But uncorroborated sex offence cases are difficult to prove.
Yeah, agreed.
They're not. They do result in convictions sometimes. They do. There's no argument there. They do, but it's harder.
And that's why I always say, like, that's why the appeal process exists in the first place. But there's normative reasons that you can argue for it anyway. It's just like, okay, look, you have to deal with the information that's available to you at any point in time, right? Yeah. So I even under normative reasoning, you're still going to arrive at the same point: is that, hey, you got to allow like testimony to be enough sometimes.
Correct. And sometimes testimony can be very strong evidence. And particularly when it's more recent section of the person, or if the person kept a diary or something like that. I mean, recollection can be very, very strong evidence in the right circumstances. Or sometimes if someone just has that can also be very helpful. But the reality is that when you're talking about things that happened 20, 30 years ago, very few people have that strong recollection.
Yeah. But also, like, I think, to be honest, like, the reaction has been so tribalistic on this, and people are going like, like Tony Abbott and John Howard written references for effectively their mate, right? Yes. Saying, I know that he's been convicted, right? And then they're going like, oh, what a shame. And I sit there going like, mate, if you thought your mate was innocent, right? Like if somehow Lee was chucked in for a pedo thing, right? I don't care that he got it.
Thanks for just saying that.
Sorry about that, but like, I don't care that he got convicted for it. I'd be there going like, smashing that X'd out button pretty fucking hard.
Yeah, sure.
Going like, yeah, like it's just a thing. I know this person. I have trouble believing this.
Sure, and I mean, there's also complicated feelings, like particularly like so Louis C.K. the whole thing that went down with him and exposing himself to women and all this sort of stuff, and there was a lot of comedians that came out and they didn't defend him, but they defended their friendship with him anyway. So I think even if you accept the fact, like even if you don't doubt that there's there's all these issues with the
it's
case,
human to do that.
You can still be well, they're still my friend, and I'll still support them, which is a complicated thing. Yeah. But I don't know to extent how much I want to judge people for that, because I know that my friends are not perfect, and I love them, and I would want to support them even if they did something terrible. And if for whatever reason I got mixed up in something that was terrible, I'd want them to support me as well, even if whatever.
Yeah, so like I said,
and the other thing is these character references. Yeah, right. That's these character references. Also, I mean, they're not really that helpful for Pell, to be honest, because they're all provided, even though they're provided by people who say, "I know he's convicted." In reality, they're all saying, "I know he's innocent," because that's the basis on which they're saying he's a kind-hearted person who's giving to the community. And this is something that the judge said at the time as well. Look, I don't know all these references are. I mean, if you've been accused of, stealing a car and you plead guilty and you have character references that say you're an otherwise swell guy apart from that one time you stole a car, the judge can say, okay, yeah, I can take account of those. But, I mean, if you rape 2 kids or if you murder or if you do something that's serious, then there's a limit to how helpful these character references can be. Once you've reached that point, you're going to land in jail for a very long time. It doesn't really matter if the PM reckons you're a top bloke.
Yeah, and not just that, but like the way it's written is, I know he's been, like you said, these people clearly don't believe in the conviction, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
Like they just think this is a temporary roadblock, and like eventually it's just it'll sort itself out because the system has to fix itself, right? The wrong person has been thrown in jail in their minds at least, and I don't think that's necessarily going to happen.
It's a dice roll.
It's a dice roll. Yeah,
know.
Look, I feel right based on just the fact that he's such a lightning rod for this kind of thing, and it's just there have been so many cases which have been dismissed against him just because, like you said, the facts of the case have just been so extraordinary. Nobody fucking believes it, including like times where there've been accusations that he abused me at this time, and it just so happened that he was out of the country, so fucking saved by his passport in that instance. So so I sit there and go like, look, maybe he did it, but there've just been so many people that have accused him and just been so fantastical about it that I have a very high burden of proof. Well, not a high burden of proof, but like I have a very high threshold for what evidence I will accept for, hey, George Pell is guilty. And maybe I shouldn't have it, right? Maybe that's not fair. But I sit there going like, he's a lightning rod. There's extenuating circumstances. Sure, it would be nice for me to treat him like just some bloke down the hall who I don't know and who I could very well believe raped 2 kids on just that one testimony. But unfortunately, it's just happened so much to him that I can't. And that's the real problem with Pell is that it's not just right wingers, right? It's people who paid attention to the media for the last 20 or so years, going, "I'm skeptical," right? It's not like
correct. Yeah, correct. And there's a good article by John Sylvester in The Age, which gives this perspective. Really goes into the case quite reasonably. And John Sylvester's been the crime reporter at The Age for the last 2 decades or more. So it's not like he's got some, massive,
bent against
love
him
for the church. He's just a crime reporter with a centre-left newspaper. And the fact of the matter is, if he's a gentleman who attended the trial and is quite openly sceptical of the conviction in the op. And my impression is that he's sceptical because, as you say, because there's people who are out to get Pell. There's a mob mentality that is in the media and certainly in the community, people who claim they've been abused, and maybe that's an indicator that he did something, and maybe it's an indicator that he hated the Melbourne response. We don't know, and the fact of the matter is that for someone who has never been, accused of this kind, who never attempted to groom or in any way persuade these kids to be in his company before he just impromptu, as it's alleged, just, took his dick out, offended. It's a little difficult to believe that version of events, frankly, particularly with 2 kids. I mean, controlling 2 kids and abusing them at the same time. He's never really developed a relationship with them, as a lot of offenders do put effort into doing. Is
It doesn't fit
difficult to accept.
It doesn't fit the typical
profile.
mold. Yeah, it doesn't fit the typical mold of everything that occurred in Ballarat either.
Yeah.
But
So,
but I feel like we've spoken a lot about Pell. And we haven't spoken about the other reason.
Yeah, someone who I think is beyond any doubt is just one of the most low-life pieces of shit that is walking in Australia today, in my personal opinion, which is Nicola Gobbo, lawyer X.
Oh, good lord.
Who basically
let's have a measured perspective.
I personally think that this is probably one of the worst things I've ever heard anybody do in terms of like undermining, like genuinely undermining confidence in the rule of law and and in the justice system.
Just so everyone else who's hearing this gets it clear, Lee believes child pedophilia is less harmful, is less bad than informing on your clients.
I think this, I actually legitimately think this kind of case is actually worse. Like, she spent like 20 years working as an informer on her own clients. Like, I think she literally covers hundreds of people.
So she didn't.
They weren't her. It wasn't gone. Sorry, because.
So it's not as if she approached the police to set that arrarrangement up. They got her on a drug charge.
I thought they did approach her. Like, I thought she did approach them. Sorry.
No, I thought they got her on a drug charge or something. I don't know. I thought they got her on.
The timeline is a little different because you're right. They did charge her with a drug offence when she was a law student, and she pleaded guilty and she got a bond. She was an informant briefly as a result of that in 1995 while still a law student. Yeah. So at the time, she was not committing any ethical violations. She didn't have any clients. She was probably people who she was buying or selling drugs to because she was charged with trafficking and she was found with a lot of drugs in her possession.
Yeah, 1.4 kilos of amphetamine.
Wait, so you're saying the actual full story is she did that for that time and then she decided to keep going with it?
Yes, that's what the case.
No, sorry, that's not right either. No, that's not right. Sorry. Now you need to skip forward about a decade, okay, from 1996 to around 2005, as I understand it, or the mid-early 2000s. She becomes an informer again for unrelated reasons. She gets involved with the organised crime families as a lawyer, acting for them as a barrister, and she socializes with them so much that a judge warns her away from socializing with them because she's so connected to the legal community that a judge just decides to do that. She still socializes with them, and then she gets sick of them because they're murder. They're organised crime. They're not pleasant people. And then she starts disclosing information, apparently, that she receives through these social chats. Now, as I understand it, that
my well of sympathy just dried up.
Going on. No, I'm not telling you she's
all gone.
She's a saint. I'm saying these social with people who were not then her clients, who may have been her clients later or beforehand, as I understand it, were the sources of information that she disclosed to the Victoria. So she then did not act for clients if the matter was, the charge was related to information she disclosed, but she still informed on them beforehand or afterwards. So
okay, so she wasn't informing.
It's not quite the same. It's
Yes.
not quite the same as a lawyer just outright informing on a client.
So she never
in relation to the specific matter that they're in front of, that they've approached that lawyer for. So but it is still pretty bad.
So she technically never broke. She technically never broke privilege, correct? As in the technical.
There's
definition.
limited information, but that's my understanding. Yes,
Okay.
she didn't inform. No, but she may well have broken privilege in the sense that she informed the police about other crimes by other people related back to her by the client, while the client was still a client. We don't know. I don't.
Sure.
She didn't do that in relation to what the client told her about that she was dealing with for the client. As I understand it, there's no allegation that happened.
Okay. So
but-
I was under the impression that she was
Yeah.
actually informing on her clients as they were clients.
No.
Okay, so
No.
that's a little bit. I mean, it's
She
still
was
shit
not
of the
doing
cops
that.
to kind of do what they did, but I
Yeah.
had the wrong understanding. So I think that's it's still really bad. Like, it's still really one of the worst things I've
It's
heard of.
very, very unwise behaviour for a lawyer to disclose criminal information to the.
So
in this way.
I'm legitimately surprised no one at the DPP's head has rolled on this.
And to add to that,
There's a Royal Commission going on
because
right now,
as you say, the High Court has said that the Victorian police have more or less aided and abetted in a breach of the law by her.
Yeah.
So she seems to have breached privilege in relation to her clients, but not necessarily in relation to the specific things they were on those occasions. So, I mean, Mick Gatto was one of her clients, and he's in prison now. He may get out because she seems to have informed on him in relation to other things that happened. We don't know what exactly the information she disclosed is.
So
Well,
you know what?
I mean, it's worth mentioning out that there's actually a Royal Commission into this whole affair. So presumably, at some point, that there will be a full accounting for all of this stuff.
So, I actually remember reading an article from one of the newspapers saying South Australia can't guarantee that they don't use lawyers in this way either.
Right.
Well, this is interesting because there's apparently been other informers in, not all of whom are lawyers. Apparently, there are apparently some medical professionals who have been used in the same way, and their identities are still secret, albeit now the Royal Commission may be reviewing their names and their histories too, so disclosing apparently privileged information that they're receiving from clients. Of course, doctor-patient privilege is not quite the same as lawyer-client privilege. But it's
So pretty
No,
serious.
there's loads of exemptions for medical one. I know for a fact.
correct.
Like
Doctor-patient privilege. If you tell something to your doctor, the doctor can still, that medical file can land up in court.
Yep.
Don't assume that it can't. It definitely can. Yeah. So, it is a little different.
So
I guess I can understand. Go on.
So I was going to say, one of the most common cases I know of is particularly related to soldiers coming back from PTSD. Sorry, soldiers coming back with PTSD who are going through divorce proceedings. It's pretty common for psychologists to not disclose on any medical records whether the person's suffering from PTSD because they're afraid that they'll lose their kids. And at that point in time, having the access to their kids is a stabilizing force.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
it's pretty common knowledge
Wow.
that happens.
Okay. And how does this tie into the of?
No. I was saying your medical records being submitted for to courts.
Oh, I see. It's an
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
I see. Yep. And also the other one, personal injury cases. If you say you're terribly injured and your doctor's file, that it happened because you tripped on the way home, but you say it happened at work, well, that's going to be a problem for you because those records are going to go out into the court and you're against your employer. So that's a quick example off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, keep going.
Yeah.
But turning to what's happened here, I think to the lawyers, I think it's really a demonstration of police seeking big targets and lawyers being disgusted with their clients who are big targets. And I think if we take a step and realise that all of the offenders are gangland related offenders, we've got to ask ourselves briefly, that whether if we didn't have drug prohibition or the like. I mean, Tony Mockbell would not be in the business of dealing in drugs, and he would not be up on a murder charge, perhaps, because he would not be killing anyone. The sale of drugs were legal.
Sure.
And in turn, lawyers would not really be compelled to inform on, gangland hitmen or whatever it is. If there were no gangland, police would not be inclined to take evidence from lawyers in this very confronting fashion, which the High Court's not very impressed with them for. If there were no charge, if drugs were legal to sell them, it's worth noting this whole drama probably would not happen in relation to any other scenario other than organised crime and the main source of organised drug prohibition. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of, wasn't there a federal prosecutor who got busted for trying to conspiring to bring in meth into the country? I'm trying to think of the name of the person who was involved, but I mean, this you're absolutely right in that this is the effect that the war on drugs has on law and order. And I mean, even going down to say, how prison guards interact with prisoners in smuggling drugs into prisons, and there's at so many levels, drug prohibition and the war on terror as well to an extent, but usually, I mean, drug prohibition in particular has this really corrosive effect on the rule of law, and it encourages all kinds of corruption. It encourages all kinds of rule breaking and bending of norms, and it's a terrible thing. And that's when I try to argue for legalization to conservatives, I say, look, you care about good governance, you care about stability and order and these sorts of things. Well, drug prohibition creates corruption. It creates these kinds of outcomes.
Well, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, policing anything that's a victimless crime is going to end up with not really the best outcomes. Well,
you needed informants for a start. I mean, that was Milton Friedman's point. Yeah. It was in order to police prohibition, you need people to inform on each other, because buyers and sellers are not going to inform on people. So you need to find third parties who are going to snitch, and that undermines confidence in communities.
That's true. I don't know if that will be what the Royal Commissioner will find, though, because I don't know what the Royal Commissioner, other than, this is all very bad behaviour, and then, make some assessment of the convictions themselves that resulted from lawyer X's behaviour. But, I mean, that's just, that's dealing with the specific case. And it could have serious consequences, of course.
I really have to wonder what goes on in the mind of some of these prosecutors when they're doing this. I mean, surely they understand, hey, in a couple of years, this might actually blow back on me.
Maybe they're just right. Really optimistic and think no one's ever going to find out, which is a weird thing to think, because that's not how the world works.
I mean, the current Victorian was head of ethics and integrity when all of this was happening. Head of ethics and integrity at Victoria Police. So, I mean, it definitely the current Victorian Police Commissioner. Right. I can't recall his name. I think it's Graham Ashton.
Yeah. I'll leave it to you. I don't come from the People's Republic of Victoria.
Yep, Graham Ashton.
Is it?
Yes.
Is that him?
Yep.
There you are, Lee. So he was the ethics head of ethics, and he went on the radio recently and said he didn't see the problem at the time, and I guess it probably suggests that the police just saw it as if that a lawyer could just hand over.
Yeah.
And they didn't.
And you've got to bear in mind.
They didn't think to ask their. Okay, so I can understand the police doing that.
They must have obtained legal advice.
Yeah, that's the part that confuses me. It strikes me as weird that they wouldn't obtain legal advice before doing something like this.
Well, you see, this is an important part of the story because lawyers actually are allowed to tell the police if their client is about crime. If you walk up to your lawyer and you tell your lawyer, I am going to take a weapon now and walk over to the bank next door and start firing and join, your lawyer is allowed to call the police and tell them exactly that. So
that I understand.
That exception, yes, and that's a very exception. And what I suspect has happened is that everyone has looked at that and tried to, drive an oil tanker through that limited exception. And perhaps in driving the oil tanker through there, they lost sight of how limited it was and broke the spirit of it, if not the letter of it. Maybe the letter too, for all I know.
Yeah, sure, that makes sense. But here's the thing. So I deal with the public service quite a lot here in Canberra. Most of the public servants I know tend to err on the cautious side, I'd say. If the legal advice is even slightly they're very risk averse, because the last thing they want is their minister to end up on the news having to explain something.
Yep.
So if there's a slight thing, if there's a very slight thing, they'll tend to shy away from it. I find it weird that the police don't have that same, what would you say, risk aversion.
The police have a scalp hunting mentality, Vikas. Particularly the gang squad. The gangs have a scalp hunting mentality, and you might say the sex crimes units or some sex crimes informant.
But that's fine. That's fine. No, that's perfectly understandable, right? I totally understand that. That's the police. I'm talking about the DPP. I'm talking about the lawyers in this entire thing. Yeah.
Look, I don't know, because to answer your question, I just don't know what's going on with the DPP scenario. It may be that what Nicola Gobbo handed over was criminal intelligence hearsay. It's not like she gave evidence at any of these trials of these people. She just said, he so-and-so was going to do so-and-so. And on the basis of that, the police just happened to rock up at the right place at the right time. You understand? And as a result of that, that is led at the trial never actually refers in any way. It's just the police have just been stellar investigators this time. It's all a coinkydink.
Marvelous detective work.
Yes,
regular
exactly.
Sherlock Holmes. It's elementary.
Absolutely, and that's probably what the prosecutor in every single case just never saw. Probably just never saw this. And that is my speculation, and it's reasonably informed because otherwise, if there were reference to Nicola Gobbo and the police had given evidence in all of those trials, and it's very unlikely that she did that because that's not what is in the news at all. So I think it's I think it's the first scenario.
If the police called a witness, called her to the stand, people would notice that. It's the very nature of all this.
Yeah, that being said, she was. This did. I think she even did give evidence once in one trial, but not in more than that. There was some controversy back in 2013 about Nicola Gobbo, and this is how that it was her that was Lawyer X, because in 2013, her name was for and pretty tawdry stuff. And the thing is, once you realise that, and I certainly did at the time that the news came out, I thought, hold on, I remember a barrister being in the news in 2013. And I Googled it, suppression order or not, this came up. So I was pretty sure it was her, and I'm not surprised that it was.
So what did she do in 2013?
Well, the news in 2013, a Melbourne court, former drug squad detective Paul Dale had a sexual relationship with a barrister who later turned against him. Dale is standing trial in the Victorian Supreme Court, accused of lying to the Australian Crime Commission about his relationship with slain drug boss Carl Williams. I'm quoting direct from the article. The court heard Dale admitted to the ACC he had a sexual relationship with Nicola Gobbo, who was Carl Williams' lawyer. Are we starting to see how this is getting problematic? The jury heard that after Dale was examined, Miss Gobbo approached police and offered to wear a recording device. Are we getting any more
Oh, shit.
an indication about what's going on here?
So this is how it all started. She actually came forward for this crap.
Yeah, that may have been her first approach to the police. I don't know, but the fact is that was in the news in 2013 with no suppression order. And when the Lawyer X news came out, I would say that 99% of the criminal lawyers and probably 50% of all the other lawyers who cared to, listen to the news or talk to their colleagues knew exactly who she was anyway.
So I got told.
That's why.
Yeah, I was just like, "What's all this about?" And someone said, gave me the name, and I went like, "Okay, should I know who she is?" And she goes like, "She used to be the lawyer for Mick Gatto and all of these other people." And I said wasn't Richter the lawyer for Mick Gatto?
No. Well, he may have. Yes, that's quite different. It's Richter is very straight-laced. He's regarded as being quite a good barrister with a good reputation. They shot Nicola Gobbo, and Richter supports legalizing drugs, so he's.
I was right.
Got a good handle.
I was right. Robert Richter did defend Mick Gatto for for the slaying of Benji Vietnam.
Yes, and I think he got. So there you are.
I knew it. See, I don't pay attention to all the legal circles, but when I do, I'm right.
Well, we're heavily over time, which is fine because it's been a while since we've recorded. Are there any final thoughts that you guys have before we sort of wrap this up and finish?
Okay, so I'm going to refer to an episode of Homeland that I once saw, which said what do we do with a problem like Afghanistan? The Middle East, and they basically said. Turn it into a hit the reset button, turn it into a parking lot, and build it back up again. I think that's the only solution for Victoria.
Oh dear. Look,
Victoria any recreational nukes, Vikas, because otherwise
Victoria is
worry about.
It's home to, and Melbourne is the safest city in the world. It's safer than Sydney. So, as much as this controversy might be causing everyone to going on, at least on the data, Melbourne's doing okay.
Look. To be perfectly, hang on. Nicola Gobbo basically Harvey Dented you guys. So it could be, the Harvey Dent law, right? It made Gotham super safe, but it was basically done by making everything tyrannical. So, I mean,
maybe.
You don't know. Maybe she's just, this entire thing coming out is just going to release all those, the Gattos and all of those people. The Gattos, what's the other guys? I watched Underbelly. Why do I?
And she's just flipping a call. Now she could go on a rampage.
Yeah. I watched Underbelly. Why don't I remember these names?
Okay.
I mean,
that was
probably
just
my final thought is that the reason I think this is so shocking is because it's so unusual. I'm sure if there was full access to all the records and people could really investigate this stuff, there'd be more examples. But I can't imagine there'd be that many. So I guess the comfort I take is that it's good to know that this is not the normal kind of thing. If you're in Venezuela or if you're in lots of countries around the world, that don't have a crash hot record of rule of law, like this would not be totally unusual at all. Like it'd be
except
it'd be
South Australia. Actually, except South Australia said they can't guarantee they don't have lawyers.
Sure.
Performance. And I bet you, I bet you, if you ask New South Wales, they'd probably say the same thing.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I'm not saying this never happens. I'm just saying it's probably compared to a lot of other situations. It's so noteworthy.
Very,
because
very
it's so
unusual.
unusual. So even if this leads to a review in a couple of states and it's found out it's happening, I can't imagine it's like every single lawyer is like grassing on their clients. So
I know Zeev would grass.
Well, I mean, no one would trust their lawyer. Absolutely. I do that all the time with my clients, because don't worry.
Oh no, I'm not saying
look,
all clients, just me.
Yeah, absolutely. On Vikas, absolutely. Yep, in a heartbeat.
he deserves it, so it's fine.
The thing is, if people really did this all the time, no one would trust their lawyers, and justice would not get done. Court cases would be a nightmare. I tell you what. And to be honest, would be a very difficult time. She's really done the law just.
Sure.
Unfortunately.
I mean, it seems to me that like even her clients were starting to figure this out before it sort of became known in public.
They knew.
So it's the kind of thing which
I knew years ago.
Exactly. So it's shocking to us because we're just hearing about it now. But like I think at the time they were suspicious that this is going on, which proves that if you're a lawyer and you're telling things about your clients, you're probably going to get caught. So anyway, we'll leave it at that. Zeev, thanks for coming on and being all lawyerly. And
you're welcome.
Grassing on your own state. And thanks everybody for watching and listening. And we'll be back again sometime soon. I won't promise next week, but it's definitely again.
Yep. All right.